Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third webinar in KTN's Beyond COVID-19 series. This afternoon, me and the panel will be focusing on infrastructure. So my name's Colin Tattam. I'm an exec director at KTN, looking after sector application of innovation. And I'll be facilitating our session today. Just so you're aware, this is a PowerPoint-free zone. So very much we're looking to respond to the questions that you've submitted in advance to this webinar, but also to some questions that you feed through live. And our panelists will be helping to drive a conversation that highlights some of the opportunities and challenges that we feel we face going forward. So just to briefly introduce our panelists, we've got Charlotte Hills from Tideway, we've got Mark Coates from Bentley Systems, and Kevin Reeves from Costain, and I'll say a little bit more about those in a couple of minutes. Behind the scenes, we've got Alan, who'll be sweeping up questions within the YouTube interface, and we'll be doing our best to curate these and feed them in to our conversation at the best time. So in terms of background and context, I guess why are we here today? It's quite clear, and I'm at risk of stating the obvious, but we know that the lockdown as a result of COVID-19 has seen infrastructure worldwide placed under intense strain. So we know that construction projects have been stalled. Lockdown is easing now, and we know that activity is starting again with some caution and with some measured control. But this has had a huge impact. That goes without saying on everybody. I think billions have been forced to change their lifestyles and the way that they think about the future, both as individuals and consumers, but as industrial sectors as well. So for construction, and I guess infrastructure specifically, what does that mean? The Construction Products Association estimates that construction output overall could fall by 25% in year 2020. I think for major economic infrastructure, that could fare a little bit better, maybe closer to 9%, but there will be a significant output drop. And I think as we sit here now, there's no silver bullet to make this up. We anticipate that recovery will be gradual, but we're committed to being smart, and we've got to get some good shape around what a smart recovery might look like. So I think for today, so it is that. What does recovery look like for this sector, and how can innovation specifically play a part in that? So I promise to introduce our panelists, and then I'll try and talk a little bit less, I promise. But Mark Coates, Bentley Systems. So Mark, you're working to give insight into the UK infrastructure market and educate the marketplace on how it can harness digital technology to transform the way we deliver our infrastructure projects. So at a time like this, those transformational opportunities are hugely important. Charlotte Hills from Tideway. So Charlotte, you're the innovation lead for Tideway, working to deliver the £4 billion super sewer. And I think Tideway's already got a great reputation for focusing on health and safety and reducing carbon impact, improving productivity, and innovation is a big part of that. And another relevant part of your background is involvement in I3P, the Infrastructure Industry Innovation Partnership. So I think collaboration is going to be a big theme today as an enabler to moving us forward. And Kevin Reeves from Costain. So you're Director for Internet of Things and Digital Twin, sponsored by Costain to help shape the digital transformation of UK infrastructure. So I think your work, Kevin, is all about helping to shape the digital twin landscape. And I think through doing that, you're collaborating across the piece with government, academia, and industry to ensure we drive better value from a national digital twin. Okay, so I feel like I've already delivered enough of a monologue. So I'm now looking at the questions that people have fed in advance. And I mentioned, the stall in productivity, really. So I guess the first question that's of interest to me is, how can technology innovation help in addressing the project delays specifically and changes to the large project schedules that are caused by COVID-19? So, Charlotte, do you want to pick that up first?
I knew you were going to come to me on that one. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of technology already out there that I think this crisis is going to accelerate the uptake of. I think it's not necessarily about new technology having to be developed, but there's a lot of existing innovation and technology that was, possibly seen as a nice to have rather than essential. And I think this crisis is going to really accelerate the uptake and scale up of use of those technologies.
And is that a personal view, Charlotte, or is that something you've actually seen start to happen, probably through a video?
Well, I mean, I can give you a sort of little example from Tideway in that in a sort of immediate response to the crisis and to trying to get work back going on site, somebody innovated the use of a sort of what looks hilariously like a sort of pizza, a thing that you put a pizza in the oven with, which is actually a sort of long clipboard on a stick, to hand to lorry drivers so that you don't have to get close to them to sign deliveries in. And of course, the technology is already out there to have a digital sign-ins to sites. And of course, it probably wasn't really seen as being a priority. But I think things like that are just going to become no-brainers. And, that was an immediate response to try and get over a situation, to get back working. And obviously, moving to a more digital solution is the next step from that.
Okay, so Mark, I think you're well versed in digital solutions and how to deploy them to best effect. What's your experience and to date?
I mean, for me, obviously, I work with quite a few clients, whether it be Charlotte on Tideway or on Kevin at Costains. But the one thing I'd say from an overarching position I've seen, which has been really nice, is the adoption. As Charlotte says, the technology is there. It's now the adoption. And without name dropping, the one thing I've heard most of is we were rolling out Teams this year and we were going to take 12 months to do it. We did it in 8 weeks. And that level of adoption has been absolutely brilliant, especially the industry. It has led on to other people adopting other bits of technology with such a strong gusto and desire to win and to make it prove its value.
That's interesting, because I was going to throw this challenge in later on, because I think one thing that COVID-19 has shown us is that digital technologies can be implemented at speed. We can do that. And I guess working through virtual video interfaces is an obvious one. Is there any examples of where that's happened out on site in getting people back to work safely, more quickly, more productively?
Yeah, I think I can give you two cases. One is we've got a piece of software called Legion, which is people management. We adapted that very quickly to doing the 2 meter radius for staff, and that's now been used. In fact, we've actually made it free to use to the end of September. And we've got a number of clients who've picked it up and are looking at not only infrastructure projects, but construction as a sort of a wide-ranging spectrum of office management, how to get people in and out, worrying about choke points and stuff like that, which has been a real good win. And what I didn't realise was actually it's fine getting people in, is actually getting them out should the fire alarm go off with social distancing in mind. So that was quite an interesting project to work on. And the other is 4D, planning ahead. I know sort of Tideway are a big fan of this for their sites, and planning with deliveries and working out how everything is going to go with 4D software such as Synchro. And that sort of had a nice win to get people back and keep them social distancing while deliveries are going on.
That's reminded me, thanks Mark, that we did have a specific question, so I'm going to read that off another screen here. So I guess still within the envelope of digital tech, but augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality as well. Do you see construction sites, infrastructure works becoming safer, more productive places by using those technologies? Kevin, if I can go to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen a kind of a fundamental shift in some of our site behaviours. Traditionally we have fairly large compounds, large site offices. I think we've demonstrated now that we can operate sites safely with people and management working remotely. So what we're doing as part of that is accelerating some of the digital transformation initiatives we had underway already. One of those is called Connected Site, where we're literally looking at deploying sensors onto our workforce, onto our equipment, onto plant, so that we can optimize the whole site using data to enable us to do that. Part of that is then on how do you visualize what's happening out on site in a remote way where people can still remain engaged. And immersive technology has a huge part to play in that. We'd already started to use it for things like operator training, site safety training, and thinking about sort of process optimization. How can you do that remotely on water treatment plants, for example? And we're really now starting to test the boundaries of what else we could do with that technology. I mean, Mark and Charlotte both mentioned the advances in BIM. We're able to use AR and VR to really engage with that virtual model, walk clients through kind of a virtual experience. They can understand how the construction works will play out, but also from an operational point of view, the things they might need to consider. So we've been doing things like fire safety training, where we've actually got the fire brigade in some instances and said, well, if there was a fire in this area, how would we deal with that? Is the design right? Are there things that we can change in the virtual before we then go and deploy in the physical? So yeah, I mean, it's been massively transformational for us this period. There are changes being made in our business. We're definitely adopting more remote working, and I'm really, really enthused about immersive technology in particular because of the potential it has in operations and maintenance. It could be a real game changer for industry.
Okay, thanks. So Charlotte, I can think of an example from Tideway on operator training as well, I guess, which is the tunnel boring machines. You don't want to find yourself in that environment for real until you've sat in a pretty good simulation of what it could look like and feel like when you're that far beneath the surface in such a confined space.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we'd already implemented innovations at Tideway addressing that specific issue, and the fact that obviously, there's a limit to the number of people you want to ever be putting into the actual tunnel boring machine environment. So we had funded the development of a training program that was, for TBM operators and anyone needing to go down there, which could also obviously be used, to save VIP visits down to the TBM. That was really successful and saved, lots of money and lots of people needing to be down there. And we've also bought, as another one of our sort of funded innovation projects, a full Crow VR cube, which was used to integrate with the BIM model, so that anybody could just...
Can I ask an idiot's question of what is one of those?
It's like a 3D, like a BIM cave, like a 3D environment. Anyone can go in and operate it. It could be booked just like a meeting room. So you would book to go in there, and it could, range from school children going in there just to sort of visualize what's happening, local stakeholders, through to, we had one really great sort of moment, I suppose, where we had the steel fixings team. This is at Carmouth Road in our Tideway West area. We're in there looking at the BIM model and noticed the design error that previously on a different project had caused a major incident, and so that was able to be rectified at the design stage before going any further, which saved a huge amount of money. And I think so, whereas those technologies were being used for really obvious opportunities to minimize the number of people going into dangerous environments, obviously that impetus has been massively increased with COVID and the need to just do that generally for anybody, and so again, it's another example where the technology is there, I just think that the business cases are just getting much stronger now to actually go ahead and invest in these technologies.
One question we had, which I think is a reputation for the industry. It relates to this, and I'm probably a bit guilty myself of kind of spreading this reputation, or at least asking the question. But it's about the openness of the sector to new ideas and new methodologies, and the perception that, you know, the sector is Victorian, it runs to tried and tested things. This is the way we've always done it. So just interested in, you know, your views of pre-COVID, whether that was the case genuinely, and whether you think the pandemic has helped to drive a sharper focus and a bit of a shift already in how open and embracing companies within the sector are to looking at new, potentially transformational ways of doing things. So, Mark, I'd be interested in your views on that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with you. Pre-COVID, there was a tried and tested way of introducing anything new and into a project or into a business. But you know, with what has happened, without being over dramatic, a lot of this technology that now will be used can keep a business operating, and you know, that is the essential thing of, you know, from the government reports of getting back out there, getting back working. So I think there has been a general adoption or general change of mind of people saying, yeah, we need to do something, we need to survive this crisis, so therefore we'll give something more leeway, more acceptance. And, you know, to quote one of my clients, he said, if now wasn't the time to go digital, when is? It's, you know, it's perfect. There's that incentive to move things forward. So going back to earlier, yeah, that adoption level, I would say, definitely spiked up, and the amount of requests for sort of assistance has been really nice.
Other experiences, Charlotte, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for us, you know, the business case is much, much stronger now than it ever has been. And I think that's certainly driving greater adoption. You know, yes, the industry has been quite risk adverse, and I suppose quite traditional, but I would also argue for very good reason. You know, it's quite a risky environment in which we work. So safety always comes first, and I think for that reason, you know, perhaps the industry has been a little bit slower than some others. But then, having worked in manufacturing, that's where I kind of came from in the start of my career. You know, it's very different challenges in construction. In a factory, you're working in the confines of four walls. You know, you're focused on output of production. Therefore, introducing technology is actually a little bit easier. And I think construction, well, one of the things that attracted me to construction into infrastructure was that challenge. You know, imagine trying to take that technology that works in a factory and deploy that out on a construction site. You know, it's not easy. But I think that those technology advances have come along so much over the last 2 or 3 years. And I think people now are slowly waking up to the fact that it's making their lives easier. I think that is important. You know, people will adopt this technology if it's making their life easier. I think that is starting to happen. So we are seeing a much more robust transformation and accelerated adoption of some of this technology. I mean, a really, really good example is the use of kind of 360 cameras and drones. You know, it was kind of a bit of a fad initially, I think, when it came out. But now many of our projects use that on an almost day-to-day basis. You know, you look at HS2 and the work they were doing with archaeology, you know, using regular drone scans to take scans of the dig so they can understand the progress. And you know, that's happening right across our business now. You know, we have a team of pilots within our business, which is obviously quite new for us as Costain. And yeah, we're seeing that everywhere. You know, there are certain technologies that are moving so quickly right throughout the industry. You know, it's really encouraging to see.
In terms of what we can learn from that, I'll come back to you, Kevin. So in terms of what we can learn from that, so it's obvious that part of this is a crisis response, you know, and that's a great motivator to do different things, to find solutions to catastrophes that are staring you in the face. But are there other factors that have enabled that more rapid and widespread adoption of technologies in a practical kind of value-adding way on the ground?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's I think all businesses are challenged now with what value do you add. You know, we've got to look at ourselves very very harshly in some instances and say, well, why have we been so traditional for such a long time, and almost forcing ourselves to change. And Costain, luckily, is a very innovative company. We're at the forefront of many of the industry innovations, and we continuously push hard, and it's because we recognise we have to change. The traditional sort of industry model, if you like, has been pretty similar for the last sort of 2 or 3 decades at least. And I think a lot of that change also has to come hand in hand with commercial restructures. So if you look at things like the ICE's Project 13 blueprint, that's fundamental to change in some of the industry behaviours that are also tied to that kind of risk-averse nature. So it's not just about technology. There are all sorts of other business aspects that we need to focus on and we need to change and transform, so that we really can drive those improvements that everyone seems to want. So, yeah, I think the desire is definitely there, but I think we also need those good, strong reimagining of some of the commercial structures to really unlock some of that innovation, because historically it's kind of been a bit of a barrier.
So we need to be expansive in our definition of innovation and understand that it isn't all about new tech.
Yeah.
Ways of working, contracting, commercial business models, etc.
Colin, what I also say is that not only is this, as you said, crisis management, but this is also talking to schools and education. This actually is opening up. This is digital adoption, or this greater adoption is actually opening up the job market to people who may necessarily not gone into construction for whatever reason, which is a real positive when we're looking at a shortfall of people in our industry with both backgrounds, and having this greater acceptance of technology and the ability to work more remotely is really enticing people to now maybe have a second look at joining the construction industry.
Oh, sorry, guys. So that's another really important point I just wanted to kind of bolster. Really, I think as we go through some of this transformation and we're using some of this technology that's quite attractive to certainly the younger generation, it's driving a massive intake for us from the universities. We partner now with about 14 different universities, and we're seeing a really, really strong uptake in kind of young people wanting to come into the industry, seeing what we're doing with immersive technologies and all the other great stuff. And not only is it helping us attract talent, I think it's also helping us maintain that talent. Yeah. The other thing that kind of sits alongside that, though, is the need to upskill the existing workforce. There is a risk we all jump on the train and we shoot off down the track and we've left half our workforce on the station, so we've got to avoid that too. So yeah, I think there's a huge piece of work around skills that we need to address, and making sure that we upskill the current workforce, but attracting new talent, it's so vitally important. The average age has been creeping up for years, and we need to address that balance.
I did have a very specific question, which you may have already answered, but just to recite it verbatim, but how can we innovate teaching and learning practices post-COVID-19? So how can our skills be, I guess, adapted and honed based on what we've learned to prepare us for a strong recovery and a transformed future? Oh, I'm going to pick on you for that one.
Sorry. We're dead then. Yeah, I mean, for us, we have our own technology, but we also have the Bentley Academy as well, which was obviously started off as Crossrail Academy and went on, and we had, I think, just short of 13,000 people going through that academy last year globally. And it is that advancement of technology, working in with universities. We have a gentleman, or colleague of mine called David Robinson, that works very much with Schools of the Future. So again, it's enhancing, and I know Kevin and Tideway both work there as well. And it is picking up that young generation and sort of get them to accept that the construction industry has changed. There's more advancement. It's not that traditional way of working that used to be. And then when you look at leading projects like Tideway and contractors like Costain, who are actually showing by case studies and examples, it is a case of very much moving the industry forward. But then, as Kevin said, picking up the existing and moving them forward with simple advances like as Charlotte said earlier, technology that gives you sign off on site for delivery tickets. You can do it via what was Innovate 18, now is i3P. Those SMEs can help bring that supply chain forward in leaps and bounds.
Charlotte, have you got anything you want to add in the skills space?
Well, I just, one sort of interesting thing we're working on at the moment is we're doing a project with Costain actually and UCL to develop a sort of framework for digital leadership training. So it's not just about skilling up the people actually doing the operating, but the convincing leadership of that this is the right thing to do, because obviously often people feel at a bit of a loss in terms of whether or not this is a justifiable thing to undertake the digital transformation piece. So that's something we're involved in at the moment. I just wanted to add to your previous question about, is the industry slow to innovate, slow to change, resistant to new ideas? I mean, I'm a relative newcomer to the infrastructure industry and previously worked in a completely different field. And I've been really amazed at, so I don't have maybe the weariness of 20 years of trying to, push a boulder uphill, but I feel as though, and perhaps picking up on Kevin's point, that maybe construction was always going to be the hardest nut to crack because of the nature of, every project being different, etc. And I'm always just amazed and inspired by the amount of, from innovation champions or innovators on site, who are always looking to solve problems, always trying to get things over the line, but also through to industry initiatives that are going on. There's so much going on to try to solve these problems. They're not going to be changed overnight. They're not going to be solutions found overnight to the reason why, productivity has been slow to improve, and, the carbon issue. I mean, these are big problems. But I think it's inspiring how much is being done, and there's a hell of a lot of really dedicated people trying to solve these problems, and I think it's cause for celebration and not for depression. And I think the issue about COVID and the response that we have now is, I think that if you look at issues like climate change, the issue has always been, is there really enough of an incentive to people in the here and now? And I think we're now faced with potentially, a global depression. And I think it's going to have massive impacts on people in the here and now. And I think maybe this is going to be the crisis that actually makes people sit up and take notice, because it is going to be affecting people right now and not in a mythical 100 years time.
Yeah, good point, Charlotte. I think what I'll do in a while is come back to this, I think, because I'm interested in the dynamic between what we're doing that's kind of reactive and impactful, but arguably a bit tactical, and how we can shift, I guess, to, in the longer term recovery, to strategic growth, and how we make that growth better than it would have been anyway. But I'll come back to that point. But you mentioned the carbon issue. So I'll pick up on that if I may. So in terms of decarbonisation, I think there's always a risk when there's a recession or worse, that when there is a recovery, the environmental impacts, the negative environmental impacts, can be worsened because of the energy associated with driving that recovery. But of course, we've heard a number of phrases over recent weeks and months, and one of them is build back better.
Yeah.
And I think decarbonisation could be a significant thread within that. But one question that we had that came in was, do you feel that infrastructure post-COVID will now be more or less likely to move towards decarbonisation? So who would like to pick that up?
Yeah, certainly happy to jump in there, Colin. I mean, for us, we're already set on a path of net zero, or being carbon positive actually by 2035, and setting ourselves the task of bringing our supply chain along with us as well. So I mean, that's was already a significant commitment. I suppose what we are challenging ourselves on though is, how will infrastructure change as a result of COVID-19? Will we move more towards localized infrastructure, talking about green mobility in cities, will the existing pipeline change in some way? We appreciate the money's there and it's going to be spent in infrastructure. But will how it gets spent change, and will that be based on changing consumer behaviours? If people are travelling less, working from home, what impacts will that have? So we're kind of looking at some of the technology that was already gaining traction, like modular nuclear reactors, for example, and sort of considering how they fit in this new world. Is that more localized infrastructure a greener, sustainable path for not just the UK, but globally as well? And we have other challenges. We support the aviation industry, and obviously they've been massively impacted by this current period. And speaking to some of the folk at Heathrow, they're having to fundamentally change their model. Yes, aviation still has a very important role to play, but they're looking at now, potentially hydrogen fuel for planes. Completely different approaches to what has been a pretty sort of traditional industry for quite a while. So, I mean, for us, we were already on that path, I suppose. Will this drive or accelerate that change? Absolutely. I think we're now looking to accelerate even harder. We're particularly looking at making sure that we always have a carbon positive design offering. So when we're responding to a tender, for example, we're making sure that there is an environmentally friendly variant there. We're already doing loads of great work as well. I mean, Thames Tideways are kind of a shining light, really, of this sort of stuff. But
you don't have to say that, Kevin. Just to
well, they are. I mean, it's a flagship project for the UK, and they are leading the way in so many areas. I mean, that's definitely another one. So yeah, it's keen to see where this goes. From a personal point of view, really hoping that any new deal that does get made by government does come with some environmental ties, because climate change is the bigger crisis, really. It hasn't gone away, it's still there. We've got to face up to it, and I think to do that, we're going to have to change not just what we do in infrastructure, but we're going to have to change some of the economic structures as well. So I think as an industry, we've got to be aware of those macro changes that might come, that might impact us, but also look at how our industry can help foster a brighter future for future generations.
Good, thanks, Kevin. So we've got a few questions that have come in via YouTube on the chat. So these are more fun because you haven't seen them before. So the first one is around digital. So an observation that digital transformation is high on the agenda for major clients, and I guess tier ones, but what can we do to help those further down the supply chain work with digital tools and embrace those to best effect? Mark, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to that sort of comment earlier. Yeah, that adoption and then enhancing adoption and support the tier two. I know both Tideway and Costain are big advocates of it, of actually getting that training program up and running and understanding. Whether it be the sort of fulcrum sort of BIM hub, BIM cave that's used to get people understanding, or the HS2 with Kevin, that attending site using 4D before you've actually stood on site is a great way to enhance. But what I think could really sort of help it is that sort of a common route map for that sort of the industry to let people know where each company is, what their company plans are, not in detail, but basically, this is what stage we're at and what stage we're moving to. So I know when talking to tier twos, tier threes personally, they do want to sort of know, well, what is the next step and where should I be? So if you can actually link that into a flagship project, it does make it easier for them to understand.
Okay, any other observations before I move on to the next question?
I just wanted to say, well, hopefully, I know as part of I3P, that they're looking to broaden the membership of that, and that the whole point of I3P is, through a diverse membership from, clients through to small organisations or even SMEs, that we can actually have everybody having access to seeing what's going on, what's being implemented, what's best practice, what's industry standard across the piece. And I think the more that we can have transparency about that, and as Mark says, to scale things up as much as we can, the better for everybody.
Yeah, so just to come back to you on that, so, and this also reflects a question that's come in on YouTube, but you mentioned SMEs. So what role do you think SMEs and the community that they form have to contribute or to play into this recovery process? And how can large clients like yours, I guess, Charlotte, enable clearer paths and more opportunities for those guys to engage? And let's face it, those guys are going to be struggling as well, if not more.
I think it's now quite well recognised that more has to be done to support SMEs. There's so much good work being done, innovation sort of locked into this huge swathe of companies, and I completely agree. Obviously it's going to be a really challenging economic environment. I know that one of the conversations that I often have with people is around, we might use an SME for a particular innovation, but then it becomes quite hard to quantify what the benefits of that were. And I think, we really need to help SMEs by giving them, something to hold on to, that we can actually go back to them and say, okay, we used your innovation and this was the actual benefit to our project. And they can then incorporate that and use that for, pitching for other projects in future. And I think we need to get better at really trying to quantify what the benefits are to a project or program, any kind of environment in having the uptake of these innovations, because it makes it easier for everyone to justify doing it next time. So it's a very difficult problem, I think, for SMEs constantly feeling like their face is pressed up at the window. But hopefully there's recognition of it, and I think work being done, as I say, with trying to widen the I3P membership model is a good example of that.
Okay, so do you have any knowledge around when that widening of the membership model could happen? Because I think
know, hot off the press. I think it's in process at the moment. I think the idea is by the end of this year that the sort of final, aspects and how exactly it would work. But I think the idea would be that there would be, a very easy access form of membership for smaller organisations that would not be, cost intensive, but would also give access to the other, the designers, contractors, tier ones, clients, and everybody, so that we can all try to be on the same team. And I know that with I3P's strategic priority themes, the idea is to sort of form a community of practices around those and have representation from SMEs, right up to government and clients, to try to tackle these big problems. So everyone's got a seat at the table.
Yeah, so I guess the whole point there is it's for collaborative innovation at scale. To take great capability, whether it's new, genuinely new, or it's been used in other sectors, and work together to deploy that at scale. So when you were talking about SMEs earlier, for me, that adoption piece and adopting at scale across a client base, that's something we've got to do. Anyway, but enough of my views. So there's a good question here from Sarah Brooks on YouTube. I think this acknowledges that, we're working on very slim margins within and across the industry. So with a focus on research, development and innovation, how can academia be better tied in to support infrastructure and to help our sector access that research and development that could be pulled through and used? Kevin, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I suppose I would say this working for Costain, but Costain has been partnering with, I think it's 14 universities now for, as long as I've been at Costain, which is 6 years or so. And that direct link helps both us as an organisation and our clients solve their problems, but it also helps the academic community make sure that the challenges that they're focused on are the right challenges. Obviously, they can receive quite large grants from government. Government wants to make sure that gets spent in the most effective way. So that partnership between us as an industry and academia is vital. Actually, it's a really good way for us to get leading R&D and transition that into business as usual. So, a good example would be some of the work we're doing around life cycle analysis. Some of that work is being done in partnership with universities, looking at some of the new algorithms that are being developed to help organisations track different environmental measures throughout the life of an asset or a product. They're working directly with our own life cycle analysis team, and translating, I suppose, that academic learning into the tools and processes that we're starting to adopt as an organisation. And that model, it works. It's a bit different, I suppose, but it's been really, really effective. Some of the work we're doing around connected autonomous vehicles is exactly the same principle. We're working very closely with Warwick Manufacturing Group. We're working very closely with Surrey University, looking at 5G technology and some of the elements of that. And again, that's fed into the projects and the trials that we've delivered in the real world. So, I think it is relatively unique. I don't think there are, many companies like Costain doing that, but it's definitely something we want to encourage, because it's a model that does work, as Sarah rightly pointed out. With small margins, that relationship has been transformational for us. The university doors are always open to organisations, so I would just encourage anyone to go and speak to your local universities and get engaged, because the bright ideas that are coming out of some of our academic institutions are just mind-blowing.
There's some institutions, departments, initiatives, academic initiatives that have had significant investment to direct good quality research development into this industry, aren't there?
Yeah, definitely. You look at, connected autonomous vehicles is one of the best examples. There are, well, I'm not going to say every university, but there are at least 12 or 13 universities I know of who are involved in connected autonomous vehicles, looking at all sorts of different aspects. Then you've got things like the living labs, for example, and there are 7 now across the UK. You've got one up in Newcastle, being led by the university up there, looking at kind of smart city initiatives, and they're working very closely with Northumbrian Water and Siemens and Costain and others. And that's the same right across the UK. There are really, really focused sort of test beds set up, funded by government, that any organisation can go and contribute to and get involved in. And again, it's just something that I would encourage. Some of the 5G work that we've been doing, we've been able to go down to Surrey University, use their facilities there. You could go to Cranfield University, for example, and they've got their own water treatment network. You can go and sort of trial stuff there. So every university has its own niche, its own specialisms. As I said, for us, it's been really eye-opening, and it's enabled us to accelerate some of the R&D work that we've been doing.
So, Charlotte, I'm interested from a client viewpoint. Is kind of academic interaction something that you've experienced directly, or do you manage that through the supply chain?
Some of it we've managed through the supply chain. We've supported some of the academic work being done, again, with our Costain CVB JV at Tideway East. We're supporting a PhD student who's actually developing a digital transformation sort of benefits assessment framework, which is really exciting, and we'll be sharing that with I3P. But during the design phase of Tideway, we had lots of interaction and meetings with various academic institutions to see whether there was an opportunity to align with academic research work going on at that point, to see if at what point could we offer up the sites that we had and the work that we were doing to sort of be part of that. And I think the big learning came from that really it was really helpful, but I think it needed to be started even earlier on in the process, that even though it was still during the design phase, it's quite a big lead up time needed to really sort of maximize the impact that you can have. But we're always really open to collaborating with academic institutions, see it as part of being a responsible client.
Okay, good. So Alan has been working behind the scenes to help us curate some of the questions that are coming through. But Alan, you've got something you want to ask yourself, is that right?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. This is a comment and a question that's come in from Mariam, who's asking about which it says it'd be useful to have a collective report from the infrastructure sector post-COVID, outlining the digital transformations that's happened during the crisis. Do you know who would be well placed to put a report like that together, which shows the depth and length and breadth of innovations, in a post-COVID world?
I know that I3P has started work on its kind of, what is the opportunity for I3P to respond here, and it's in quite early days, but in the sense of having a view of all the innovations that are going on across all the members. And I don't know whether I3P is therefore the best placed to produce a report like that, but I think there's definitely going to be room to take a view on what the impact has been a bit further down the line. I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add to that.
So there has been some work done on that already. I think it was led by the ICE Institution for Civil Engineers, and they started to produce a digital maturity matrix, which I think was published last year or year before. Building upon that, the Centre for Digital Built Britain is currently collaborating with the ICE, the Infrastructure Client Group, and the Construction Leadership Council to start to look at the trends and the potential scenarios that might occur as a result of COVID-19, and that will look at where companies have managed to accelerate already. The ICE did release a survey, I think it was a couple of months ago now, asking organisations, what were the kind of immediate impacts, positive and negative, of COVID-19, and what did they see as being the trends that would really start to take hold. So that work is definitely taking place. I would say keep an eye on the ICE's publications and reports, keep an eye on the Centre for Digital Built Britain reports, and definitely keep an eye on the Construction Leadership Council, because they've built a big consortium now of pretty much all the industry bodies to start to help with the post-COVID world and accelerate infrastructure and built environment investment.
I want to jump in there, but Alan, is there anything more from you before I do?
Just a nice comment from Sarah, who says, "Thank you for being so enthusiastic about engagement with universities." Great to hear, she says.
Good. So yeah, Kevin, you name-checked the Construction Leadership Council there, which I think is important, because we need to acknowledge that the industry is coming together and looking at this in quite a considered and structured way. We're not still in kind of crisis response mode, wondering what the future holds. And I think we'll all have heard the restart, reset, reinvent philosophy. I'm going to do a show of hands as to who hadn't heard of that, but then saw it as a high-risk approach, so I didn't. I think a lot of what we've been talking about is kind of been in the here and now. Certainly learnings from COVID and the immediate response, if we can call it that. And I guess that's falling under the restart heading. But more, I guess, the resetting and the reinventing, that's going to need some decent strategic approach. I think we're focusing more specifically on innovation as an enabler here. But what do any of you think will help to facilitate or oil the wheels of a good strategic response and plan to innovation-fueled growth for the sector in the medium to long term?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. So been involved with the CLC's recovery plans and kind of helping shape some of that work. And I think first and foremost, for me at least, is the need for collaboration. There are so many stories about our industry being fragmented, which, yes, okay, you could kind of agree with that in some respects. But I think that, we have already been building a very collaborative culture. You look at the joint ventures, the alliances. Actually, as an industry, we're really good at this. And I think that as we go through that recovery process, what the CLC have been really good at doing is bringing together, and I think it is almost every industry body, coordinating them into 4 working groups. As you rightly said, the initial focus was on getting stuff restarted and thinking about the reset phase. But as we think about the reinvent phase, kind of the forefront of that really is agreeing what a good industry vision should look like. What are we heading towards? I think, by driving that sort of consensus across our industry, giving people the chance to get involved in forming that vision, then I think we stand a much better chance of driving, good value-adding innovation that's fixing real-world problems that we have, not just now, but in the future as well. So yeah, they're the two things for me really. Collaboration is absolutely vital, but making sure we have a good vision that the industry is bought into, so that we all head in the same direction.
So a bit of a mean question, but historically, has our sector been good at collaboration? Honest answers only?
Yeah, sorry, go on, Mark.
Like I say, it's good at collaboration, but it's not very good at communication. So the amount of major projects have happened, there's been some fantastic innovation led by some great leaders, and then that team gets dispersed and moved on to another project, and not all the innovation and not all the learning has been transferred to the new project. So that so 2 steps forward, maybe 3 steps back, or 1.5 steps back, depending how you want to look at it. It's, if we could communicate better on the good examples we set to the world, we'd obviously move the industry forward a lot quicker.
Do you think it's possible for any industry with very low margins to have a good collaborative approach, I wonder?
As you said earlier, it's the people that make the industry, and the number of people that are willing to move the industry forward. That's an extreme positive within our game.
Mm. And I think I'd hope that slim margins that drive, shared investment, shared risk, shared vision. And I know it's idealized, but I think there are pockets of good stuff, and it's been good to hear some of your observations actually, because I think we're guilty sometimes at focusing and repeating the things that we haven't done well or don't do well. But your point, Kevin, we're good at this stuff. I think it's absolutely right. We've got plenty to feel positive about. I guess to your point, Mark, we're failing to actually push the exemplars of good progress, good collaboration, good transformational change and how it was done. How do we make sure we capture that and sell it and inspire? And I guess that also links back to the point about, is there going to be a report around, what the learnings are around digital adoption as a result of COVID-19? Why don't we sweep up all the great things we did? And they won't have been perfect, but if you aim for perfection, you'll never make any progress. So let's try to celebrate the successes a bit and inspire ourselves and the next generation to see collaboration and innovation as a significant part of the solution going forward.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I'm conscious the clock's ticking. We're not at 3 o'clock yet, but I was kind of shifting us to more the kind of strategic long term. Collaboration was something you highlighted, Kevin, as a priority. So I guess, Charlotte, anything from you in terms of long-term priorities that we can all get behind and focus on as part of our vision?
I don't really have much. I mean, collaboration is the big buzzword, isn't it? And I think setting the processes in place, eliminating as much of the red tape as possible, so that it's not insurmountably hard to get small projects off the ground. Which I think historically has been an issue. Certainly, sort of my experience has been that with the best will in the world, there's a lot of obstacles to ever really making anything happen. And I think there's a lot of good efforts that have already been set in motion, and we now just keep the eye on the prize and keep going, because I think the processes have been put in place. Project 13, all really good. A lot of the carbon stuff was already happening. I think we just now need to reframe it all and keep going.
Okay, good. And before we go back to Alan for another question, Mark, any any priority areas for you for kind of strategic, medium, long term?
It's that communication. It's taking exemplar projects like HS2, like Tideway, learning how they have had to cope with what's going on as much as everybody else, if not more. It's taking those exemplar projects and saying, this is how we cope with it, and then communicating that out to the marketplace. So smaller projects can learn from those that tried and tested way.
And I think, just sorry to pick up on that, Mark, I mean, I've been having chats with Mark about the knowledge piece on this as well. And as Mark said before, the importance of learning the lessons from each project. And I think that, I know with the Tideway project, we've tried to be sort of leading the way and being a responsible client, and the aim always being to leave the industry in a better position than it was when we started. And I think the big next thing for us is going to be to make sure that we, adequately and in a really, world-class way pass on the learning from our project, so that everybody can benefit from that and hopefully not make the mistakes next time. So the knowledge piece is a big one.
Well, I think, just picking up on what Charlotte said, there's going to be so many external influences coming down the line as we move forward into the future, that they will also have an impact, and there may be requirement to share data and best working practices with people outside the construction industry, whether that be a bank or an insurance company. So therefore, taking that learning curve and being able to replicate it is really important.
Okay, guys, I'm going to be ambitious and try and squeeze one further question in, but I suggest that it's probably for one or at most two of you to respond. So, Alan, what's come in?
Yeah, I think this is the final question, I think, really from, I hope I'm saying the name right, Cresso, who asks, is there any sociology research into the politics of infrastructure, not just innovation from a technical point of view? Who wants to have a stab at that?
I don't know is the answer to that.
Yeah.
Time's up.
I can pick up if you want, guys. Do you have a bit of an answer? I was just going to say, it's actually it's one of the folk from Tideway leading the way again, but they are looking at the contribution towards sort of social value. So thinking about this in terms of procurement of services and goods, for example, rather than it just being about cost and quality, looking at different value areas under a new value framework that could help with that, and looking at the social impact of an infrastructure project. So what does it do to the local community in terms of well-being, for example? How do you measure and monitor that as part of an infrastructure project, and how would that then help to inform future government policy? So there is work underway. It's pretty early stages. There's a new value framework being developed by the Construction Innovation Hub, and that's looking at the 5 capitals model, so natural, social, human, environmental, and manufacturing. And then looking at how we can basically change the procurement model for infrastructure, so that we don't always drive towards lowest cost procurement. We focus on delivering maximum value.
Yeah, so that is one of the transformational changes that's highlighted in the industrial strategy, isn't it? It's procurement based on lifetime value rather than upfront capital costs. Yeah, big thing. So conscious we got 2 minutes to go. So I'll stop taking questions there. So I think all that's left for me to say is a big thank you to the panelists for being so nimble on your feet and responsive to those questions, and for giving us the benefit of your experiences and what we might expect from here. It's been a really stimulating and interesting discussion. I think if anyone watching and listening has any observations or suggestions or needs to get in touch to follow up on anything they've heard today, then they can do that through normal KTN channels. But again, thank you for listening. Thank you, panelists.
Thanks, Colin.
Good afternoon.